Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never practice nunchucks in a crowded room. Never eat chole before a road trip. Always take your shirt off before you iron it. Don't take a call near a swimming pool. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
500 prisoners marched into the ship's rusting hold, replacing the cargo of bananas that had been unloaded onto the docks at Port Isabel, Texas. For the next 48 hours, children, women, and men were packed below decks into berths just 2 feet wide and 3 feet long. There was just one toilet and no clean drinking water. Late in 1956, after a mutiny that saw dozens jump into the sea in a desperate effort to escape this hell, immigration investigators likened the conditions to, I quote, an 18th century slave ship. As America worked to expel thousands of migrants, rounded up into trucks and dumped into the desert across the border, horrible conditions had become the norm. 88 immigrants, one labor inspector reported in 1955, had died after being held in 45-degree heat, and more would have been killed had the local Red Cross not intervened. From early in the new year, United States President-elect Donald Trump has vowed to begin what he calls the largest deportation of illegal migrants in American history. His coming war on immigrants is modeled, Trump has said, on 1954's Operation Wetback, wetback being a derogatory racial epithet for Mexicans who crossed the Rio Grande River. They moved 1.5 million people out, Trump claimed. We have no choice. We have no choice. Estimated to involve annual costs of up to $88 billion, the details of Trump's deportation program aren't yet known. Experts and media accounts, though, suggest it will aim to remove at least 1 million of America's estimated 11 million illegal migrants each year, and legal migration will also be sharply scaled back. Trump's program will be watched very closely across the West. Facing rising right-wing rage, Europe has been struggling to harden its borders and return illegal immigrants to their homelands. Even Canada has been rolling back its liberal immigration policies as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government runs into the rage of citizens. For its part, India has a special interest in what Trump does. The Bharatiya Janata Party has, of course, cast illegal immigration as a key issue within India. But Indians also make up the fourth largest group of illegal immigrants to the United States. Their repatriation, should it take place, will have serious consequences for many families in states like Gujarat and Punjab. Even as he prepares to launch his war on immigration, though, Trump has a problem. The model he's chosen, you see, failed 7 decades ago and has kept on failing since. The Day of Judgment, San Fernando resident Maria Luna called it. Late on an Ash Wednesday afternoon in 1931, that's the first day of the weeks of prayer and fasting before Easter, immigration officials and police descended on migrants returning from work in the nearby lemon groves. The deputies rode around the neighborhood with their sirens wailing, advising people to surrender themselves, Luna recalled. The women cried, the children screamed, others ran hither. Since the late 19th century, Mexican migrants had provided the sinews of America's economic growth. Historian Francisco Balderrama writes, they harvested sugar beets in Minnesota, laid railroad tracks in Kansas, packed meat in Chicago, mined coal in Oklahoma, assembled cars in Detroit, canned fish in Alaska, and sharecropped in Louisiana. Basically did all the work no one else wanted to do. Frank Bixby, a prominent rancher and landowner, was among many in America who objected to efforts to stem this tide of immigration, Balderrama records. We have no Chinamen, he said. We have no Japs. The Hindu is worthless, the Filipino is nothing, and the white man just will not do the work. The end of the First World War, however, saw the rise of a new isolationist force. America had limited immigration from southern and eastern Europe, distanced itself from dealing with global issues, and raised walls of tariffs. The isolationist impulse grew stronger after 1929 when the Great Depression broke over America, inflicting hardship and unemployment on millions. The infamous Tariffs Act of 1930 was intended to protect American agriculture and farmers whose incomes had fallen. It ended up hurting global trade and the country's economy. Labour pushed hard in this tough climate for migrant workers to be kicked out, believing it would improve wages for citizens. Led by Labour Secretary William Doak, the United States government began pushing tens of thousands of migrant workers back across the border into Mexico. 50,000 people, farmhands, laborers, shopkeepers, even cripples and lepers from hospitals, are estimated to have been repatriated from the Los Angeles area alone, coerced into jam-packed repatriation trains. Tens of thousands of others drove back across the border on open trucks or simply walked into the desert. Excelsior, one of Mexico City's leading newspapers, reported that 25 people, including children, died of illness and malnutrition on one repatriation train alone. The beginning of the Second World War reversed the anti-immigrant tide once again, however. Farms across the US desperately needed workers to make up for men drafted into the military. This time, though, Mexico had begun to industrialize and modernize its agricultural sector. It needed to ensure it also had a pool of cheap, flexible labor. The two countries, historian Kelly Hernandez explains, agreed to put in place a regulated labor regime to provide seasonal agricultural workers, or braceros, to America. In the 1940s, Hernandez records, American immigration authorities and the military in Mexico cooperated closely, deporting large numbers of illegal immigrants. 5,000 Mexican troops were deployed in 1949 to seal the border after Mexican farmers complained too many laborers were traveling north. In some cases, Mexican soldiers opened fire to stop immigrants from escaping US border guards. From just 8,189 in 1943, the number of Mexicans deported rose to 875,318 in 1953. Scholar May Ngai records in a magisterial book on how America's immigration regime worked. Employers, interestingly, weren't very happy. In 1951, Rio Grande landowners described the Border Patrol as a Gestapo outfit that was forcing their willing, if unlawful, workers away from laboring on their lands. And there's an important caveat to all these figures, though, of expulsion. Even as the US drove out illegal immigrants, it was providing work permits to hundreds of thousands of migrant workers at the same time. In many cases, the expelled immigrants were simply rehired on work permits on the spot, a process Riley described as drying out. Remember that ugly word, wetback. American immigration policy analyst Alex Nauraste notes that the Department of Labor actually gave preference to legalizing unlawful migrants over admitting new braceros, obviously because they were skilled, knew some of the language, and understood the labor market. Even as political polemic warning of a demographic invasion from across the Rio Grande grew in the United States, former General Joseph Swing was given charge of Operation Wetback and ordered to declare war on unlawful migrants. He finally proclaimed victory in 1954, a year in which over 1 million migrants were expelled, as Trump tells us. The following year, though, amid growing concerns over human rights abuses and angry protests from employers, Operation Wetback slowly wound down. Legal work permits would continue to be issued until 1954, and large-scale illegal immigration was also quietly allowed to resume. From numerous studies and scholarship, it's clear that the numbers just don't justify the panic and furor over illegal immigration. In 2022, demographers Jeffrey Passel and Jens Krogstad showed that illegal immigrants made up just about 3% of the country's population. Now, immigrants, lawful ones, make up some 14.3% of the country's population, far lower, by the way, than the 14.9% they were in 1890. Lawful immigrants, moreover, have been growing far more rapidly than illegal ones. Large-scale removal of illegal immigrants, one study shows, would hurt key sectors like construction and childcare, ultimately damaging the livelihoods of all. And even though Trump has stoked white anxiety with stories of violent, pet-eating, rapist immigrants, the reality is at some distance from his narrative. Criminologist Ariel Ruiz Soto has shown that illegal immigrants living in Texas, for example, commit crimes at significantly lower rates than US born citizens as well as lawful immigrants. And that makes sense because if you're a tiny minority just looking to work somewhere and send money home, you're not going to be sticking your head out getting into fights. Europe's experience also bears out this lesson. Even though European Union states have spent over 11 billion euros combating illegal immigration since 9/11, expert Emma Lang writes, the movement of people seeking new lives there hasn't been significantly dented. The numbers go up, the numbers go down, largely driven by demand, but there's been no fundamental change. For all the hype, moreover, illegal immigrants constitute just a tiny fraction of legitimate migrant flows into the region. The cultural anxieties fueling the immigration debate aren't hard to see, of course. As Gabriel Sanchez and Quado Frimpong observe, foreign-born voters will outnumber US-born ones by 2060. And whites will become the largest of many racial minorities even earlier by 2045 or so. Yet, as International Monetary Fund economist Giovanni Perry argues, only net immigration can address the problem of shrinking Western populations. Even though immigration stokes ethnic and racial fear and anxiety, it's worth considering that each wave of people arriving in America has first been decried as unassimilable, only for them to establish themselves as agents of economic growth and cultural vibrancy. For anti-immigration populists, history should hold out an important lesson. There's no way for a nation to wall itself off from the world without impoverishing itself. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.